break. It's Tom Bechtold, your host for today's virtual conference. Up next, we have safeguarding ethical development in ChatGPT and other LLMs through a comprehensive approach, integrating security, psychological considerations, and governance. This is an important topic, and I really feel like we've got the right person here today. KJ is a new friend of mine from our Dallas Advisory Council. Welcome, KJ. It's Kimberly Haywood, for those of you that don't know her. She is going to be delivering a great presentation here for us on the elephant in the room these days, right? AI. And she is with Nomad Cyber Concepts. She's also part of the ISACA Dallas chapter. KJ, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. The floor is yours.
Hi, Tom. Thanks again for inviting me and the Secure World team for having me be a part of the conference. I'm in the Dallas area for those of you who are not familiar with my face, and I am a part of ISACA as well as ISC Squared Dallas Fort Worth. So if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, you're welcome to do that. Today we're going to cover, I'm going to start with our kind of overview of what we're going to jumpstart with. We're going to start with the introduction of large language models, learning language models, three-coin holistic approach that I've developed, and a practical security measures, psychological considerations, governance strategies, recommendations, and we'll wrap it up with, of course, Q&A today. So let's jump start into generative AI tools like large learning models. So from my perspective, what you're going to hear about today, and I can let you guys read the slide, but what you're going to hear more about today is a combination of months of my research, conversations with SMEs, and my published work regarding the ethical considerations of large language models, including ChatGPT as a system, integrating security measures, psychological considerations, and governance, and that would include both risk and privacy, of course. So we're going to start out with the three-coin approach and covering it from large language models and or language models. I know that term is interchangeable, and in this presentation, it's going to be focused on LLM. So we're just going to abbreviate it LLM. But we're going to start with practical security measures. We're going to cover that. We're going to cover the psychological considerations, and then we're going to dive into AI governance. What's happening in that arena? What's going on with AI governance? And how can organizations such as yourselves or individuals who are consulting get their head wrapped around the safeguards of the governance aspects of AI. So let's start off with the practical security measures. We're going to cover a need for a comprehensive approach, security challenges with LLMs, new versus old, prioritizing security and development, a new approach versus an old approach, and the API security, generative AI, and looking at that from that lens. So let's dive into security by design, a need for a comprehensive approach to generative AI. And as we know, security by design is really focuses on the principles that emphasizes the importance of incorporating security measures into the products and the systems at the very beginning of their design and development, rather than adding them into the system as an afterthought. The idea is that by making security by design an integral part of the design process, systems are inherently more secure and robust against potential threats. And some of the core principles really are outlined here, which is, and I'm sure if all of you can see the slides well, and I hope that you can, it talks about requirements, which is the top tier, the second tier design, implementation, the third tier, verification, and the the fifth tier, I can't count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maintenance. So as a part of the secure by design approach, we really want to kind of dive into the dynamic interactions among security, psychological, and governance, and how do you integrate those utilizing a security by design approach. The resilience and ethical behaviors and user trust that's a part of that design principle is also a key element. But what we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you a little bit about the AI model development, which really bleeds into the security by design. They can actually be used cohesively. And the AI model lifecycle, development lifecycle, really includes identification of the business problem, makes sense, right? Identifying, collecting data, preparing the data, the model building and training process of that, and the model testing and the deployment. All of those 6 steps make, of course, comprehensive steps and make sense. And that's because generative AI presents unique classifications for threats that really should be considered in the security by design process. So with the AI model development lifecycle, the security by design process and the AI model design process, in my opinion, should be used in the same format, collectively together. The security by design process talks about the dynamic interaction between the psychological and governance and how it should be integrated and processed. At least that's what I'm sharing with you today, of how those things blend together. So all that intertwine, the aspects of psychology and governance, how does that fit into all of this, right? Talks about ethical, talks about the security and safeguards. We're going to talk about that in this area. But for successful implementation, it's really imperative to ensure resilience and to promote ethical behavior and foster user trust as developments of LLMs are occurring and or tools, right? As security professionals, we should hold firm that a holistic approach is essential to address the multifaceted concerns that we have, which are only growing by the minute, literally, as we all know. So let's turn the page to discuss the security challenges in AI LLMs. And we're going to cover, let's see if I can grab that, the significance of proactive security measures, DAN 13.5, potential for prompt injection and impersonation. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the consequences of malicious prompt injection, theft, false information, erosion of trust, which we all know, right? That's all pretty much given. For those of you who've been in this industry for a while, that's just the common. So in my research, this is what I've discovered, that by implementing a proactive security measures, and I know some of this sounds like common sense, but unfortunately during development, this is not being implemented as vastly as it should globally. Such as creating new internal security policies and parameters, or processes that really address UX, UI, user interface, user experience, user interface, UI. So if you allow the usage of LL tools in your organizations, you really should treat them kind of as a third-party vendor, which means that they must be vetted properly as much as possible. Enforcing password rule changes and enforcing multi-factor authentication, implementing data encryption for standards of transport storage that's being adhered to, similar to kind of some OWASP guidelines and standards. You want to kind of keep it along those lines. The difference is that you're utilizing or viewing ChatGPT or other tools that are in your system that you decide to either develop and those you decide to purchase, that you're viewing it from the lens of treating it as a third party. If it's going to be, a TPRM, third party risk management, you're going to integrate that into your program, and you're going to treat it as such, right, as any other application or system in your ecosystem. So treating it like as a third party means integrating and managing it with the same standards. As I mentioned, OWASP as being one of them, precautions and oversights that you would also naturally, externally look at, even if you had software, again, or any hardware or any other systems in your organizations, just to ensure that the consistency in the security and functionality is also compliant. So it's, again, viewing large language models, LLM tools in your organization as such as any other tool that's in your organization that is sitting in your ecosystem, your security ecosystem. You want to provide oversight to that. We guard against prompt engineering and abuse. Prompt engineering is the DAN 13.5. Some of you may or may not have heard of that, but it's relatively old, but it's the concept that plays into it, which is why I'm still talking about it. It's a prompt. It was a prompt injection, which poses a significant threat to generative AI systems at the early stages of ChatGPT. And it's a role-playing model for ChatGPT that allows AI to assume different roles. Like for example, a sophisticated attack that deceitfully injects a malicious prompt into an LLM, and it manipulates the output to users like ourselves. So if a threat actor assumes the role of a medical provider, for example, you have a specific way of communicating to that medical provider, be it text messages, be it emails, or phone calls for that matter. Financial institutions, the same way. They have the ability to do impersonations. Now, I mentioned DAN 13.5, but there are other GPT tools that have already presently been designed and are already on the market and being used that use a similar impersonation process for malicious intent. And I'll cover that a little later in my presentation. But the idea is that this type of attack obviously leads to massive amounts of possible data loss, IP loss, funds for that matter. So as technologists, as developers, as leaders, all of us, we really must adopt a security approach that is consistently focused on also counterintelligence, right? Countering those potential threats, countering those potential vulnerabilities in our systems, and look at it in terms of monitoring, addressing the issues that are going to be could potentially expose all of our organizations. So we want to take that proactive approach to do that. And that's what I mean by taking a proactive approach in terms of securing measures. So let's move on. So the new versus old. Now, we have had in our industry for many decades now, we have had the opportunity as security professionals, as thought leaders, as practitioners in the domain of security, we have had the opportunity to test on a robust level multiple types of security by design methodologies. And part of it, we're going to start with the world's fascination with generative AI tools. We know that innovation is going to continue to thrive. It's going to continue to grow. But as security professionals, we're obviously a lot more sensitive about the security aspects and the guardrails that we put place, protecting protecting ourselves, protecting the world from innovation so that they don't get out of control. So we have to put some security guardrails around that. Smartwatches was no different. There were some security issues around the design implementation of smartwatches many years ago when they were first launched. So we want to kind of redirect our focus and learn from the past, basically. Consumers really drive developers, and it's not the other way around. We as consumers drive the development of new innovations. We always want something new, something cool. So as technologists, we recognize that if security were prioritized truthfully, it would be integrated consistently throughout the entire development lifecycle. So from a risk analysis to testing, literally all the way through. Adopting a security by design approach, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, ensures that technology is inherently fortified against those threats, the best that we possibly can, right? For those of you who are in security, you understand that through and through. Second, engineers should prioritize security from the beginning of the AI development. And I'm talking about developers. So developers can implement it as an automatic part process. Although various software development life cycles, SDLC methodologies like waterfall and agile have been active for at least a couple of decades now, AI developments, including ChatGPT, DALL-E, Google's Bard, and Google's new similar LLM that's being launched soon, which is Genius. I think it's Genius or Genuine. I'll double check on that. You guys can definitely Google it. But Google just launched a new tool that is even more comprehensive in terms of its learning language model. And that is very, very extremely robust. And it includes voice, text, audio, visual, and still build a lack of security focus, right? So even though those developments are still in development, they're still coming out with new modules of those particular tools, security is now being thought of, and it has been, and we know this, as kind of an afterthought. So it's really essential to incorporate, in my opinion, the security by design approach in AI as with any other SSDLC, secure by design lifecycle methodologies. So contrasting with AI development with traditional SDLC methodologies, it should include a proactive approach, a responsive approach, least privilege, input validation, and secure defaults. And that's the aspect of SDLC, which is why I believe that you can take both the AI development lifecycle process and this SDLC process, incorporate the SDLC process, and integrate them too as a part of a new development. Again, so going on to our next slide, we talk about API security for generative AI. So once that tool, that system is designed, we want to kind of dive into, the open AI modernization offers tools to screen and filter content. It does. So that's what OpenAI Modernization API offers. It also enables developers to implement a custom filtration to ensure that user interaction is aligned and predefined standards and avoid inappropriate, harmful content. That's the idea. Swearing, for example, right? Or inappropriate language or inappropriate use of language. The modernization endpoint of it analyzes the content for, like I said, hateful speech, harmful words, sexual content, we're talking words, abusive language, swearing, as I mentioned earlier. And it basically filters all of that out. And it blocks all the content generated by OpenAI's API. And organizations can actually create their own filtration. It doesn't necessarily have to be OpenAI's modernization API. I'm just giving you an idea or suggestion that it does exist and that there is an actual filtration system for content that actually exists on the market for those organizations who are interested in designing their own LLM tools. But still with that, you still want to make sure that there are safeguards around the implementation of those designs. So when I talked about treating AI tools like other third-party AIs, that's what I'm actually speaking about, to bring it back full circle, is that you want to see that system as a system. And you want to treat it as such if it is something that you are purchasing or it is something that you're developing and you plan to use it in your own organizations. So when I talked about e-crimes earlier about the DALI 13.5, I mentioned that there are other LLM attacks that have occurred using these three types. One is Fraud GPT. And Fraud GPT is an LLM that's, it sounds like it is. It's an LLM that is tailored specifically for fraudulent activities. The system can be programmed to craft believable phishing emails and messages impersonating in legitimate organizations. This is DALI 13.5 on steroids. That's basically what Fraud GPT is. It is not designed by our technologists from a white hat perspective. This is designed by malicious attackers. This has been designed and has been on the market, has been purchased, and it is being used. That's the scary part. The Worm GPT is designed to exploit vulnerabilities in your technical ecosystem. That's scary. It might spread through an entire network, literally hopping from one device to another and using AI to adapt. Remember, it's a large language model, so it's adaptive, and it finds the best strategy to infiltrate and even spread further. So giving the ambiguity of smart devices that we have now, such as a worm, could cause some devastating impacts. Yeah, that one's a little, it scares me from taking control of smart homes, as well as other IoTs and disrupting corporate networks. The Worm GPT is pretty scary. Though, added to that, there is another GPT tool that has been designed that is supposed to replace Worm GPT, and it's called Evil GPT. It's a chat bot that is presently, and probably at deception of the time of this presentation, it was being promoted maybe I'd say 2 months ago. We have no idea where it is now. But it's a chat bot that's being promoted to replace Worm GPT. Now that could be occurring. This research was done recently over the last, let's say 60 days. That's possible that Evil GPT has already been launched and being used from malicious threat actors. So the sale of that particular AI tool may have already taken place by the time this presentation has occurred. But don't take my word for everything that I'm saying. I always encourage you to definitely do your research and check out other e-crimes and what's happening in that arena, and what can you as an organization do the best that you can to be prepared for counteracting malicious attempts that will be very very robust, malicious attacks that will have the ability to learn as they're ingested into organizations, into tools, into your system. So what can you do? NIST, according to NIST, it's a highly skilled and resourceful enemies, which we know. Various methods like hacking, physical break-ins, deceit, and infiltrated. The goals is to steal information. That's their bottom goal. But really what we need to do is ensure that we're constantly monitoring. We're constantly doing our due diligence and looking at our tools and our systems, again, to do the best that we can, as well as in infusing education. So my recommendations are developing a comprehensive roadmap, treating LLM systems as a third party, emphasizing user restrictions awareness, and frequent security testing. Really, really critical for your organizations. So we're going to dive into security human elements, the intricacies of trust, a bias, a challenge, and solutions. So let's first tackle the addressing UT user trust, ethical behavior, and privacy, and biases in LLMs. With the development of artificial intelligence LLMs, and for the usage of them, it's really important that it's important that it should be second nature. Let's start with that. To integrate ethical use. That should be something that we've been practicing for a while, especially as security practitioners, doing our best to ensure that any ethical designs, are being utilized appropriately, right? So safeguarding those tools from a privacy and security perspective is really important. LLMs have a unique set of classifications which require us to break down the development aspects. And that's also to ensure algorithmic bias as designs are occurring, meaning as large language models, which is masses of data that's being ingested into a tool, algorithmic bias can also play, meaning you can pull bad data, put bad data in, you're going to get output bad data, right? So algorithmic bias needs to be managed appropriately during development. What is algorithmic bias? Some of you are not sure or have heard of that. It basically is an ingest of people who are inserting their thoughts, their ideologies, their perceptions into coding, right? That's basically what it is. It's not just large language models. It's any ingestion of that person's personal opinions or strong opinions or thoughts and or culture that is ingested in that code. So it's necessary for innovators and stewards of trust that we honor our unique and powerful responsibility that we all have. Every major global innovator had to regard the practice of ethical behavior, every single one of them. Particularly at the beginning of the development. I'm using Elon Musk as one example, Google, Microsoft. If they did not, someone held them accountable. Someone, either being some global entity, government entity, had to hold them accountable. So even with their developments, there is ethical considerations, there's ethical developments that they must ensure and must practice as they're placing out their creative innovation tools and or products. So with that, there's really no real perfect solution, but our users, meaning us as users, require us to uphold our end of the bargain. So, developers consume, innovators produce, and we consume and we protect. So we as security professionals, we are to protect. Consumers consume. So we have to put on that hat of being truly a custodian of trust. There is a report that I want to share with you all. It was 2021 Internet Cybercrimes. They highlighted an example. They highlighted in their 2021. Now there is a 22 report, so please check that out. It's FBI's 2022 Internet Crime Report. You definitely want to check those numbers out because they're even more staggering than the numbers that I'm in the process of giving you. But it focuses on, just look on the report, and it will highlight phishing, smishing, and farming. The Bureau at that time reported nearly 20,000 complaints, leading to an alarming 2.4 billion in losses. Just that year alone. So the 22 report, haven't had an opportunity to take a look at it. Please take a look at that report, and you will be amazed, probably not for those who've been in security for quite some time. And this is going back to understanding us as security custodians, our fiduciary responsibility really to ensure that our organizations, that our users, that our families, that our friends are also protected as much as possible, right, from external threats. So that's on the rise. And with the and I'm going to keep going, that's also on the rise. So with the tools that I mentioned that our threat actors have access to on the market, that's even more concerning. The fraud GPT, the evil GPT, the worm GPT, those type of LLM tools that are being utilized now is even more concerning. So let's talk a little bit about trust and personal varied, trust varied, shaped by individual experience, beliefs, and values. I kind of covered a little bit about what I mean by trust, what I mean by considerations of, UT, user trust, right? So trust and personal varied, shaped by individual experiences, beliefs, and values. Leaders in this position, in my opinion, whether they're corporations, government, executive roles, have a significant responsibility to upholding trust, right? However, we're human and we're impressionable, and our trust thresholds are influenced by various factors like our experiences, our beliefs, personal values. The challenge that each person's trust level is the value of each person's trust level is different. And it's going to be widely different for each person, right? But those entrusted with safeguarding user trust, should it be our corporate leaders? Should it be our regulators? Should it be our visionaries, i.e. Google, i.e. Elon Musk, i.e. Facebook, i.e. other social media platforms? If it is, no matter who it is, they bear a really heavy burden and responsibility, given the human complexity of our susceptibility. All of us, if not everyone in this room, in this conference, we've all been susceptible to some type of threat, external threat, in some form or fashion, particularly around social engineering. So incorporating transparency, accountability, genuine engagement during the design and development phases, I believe will help balance the scale of innovation while avoiding design bias. I believe it's important to consider the baseline fundamentals of ensuring that psychological considerations, ethical trust, privacy, and governance are all integrated in that process from an oversight perspective, as SDLC models are used, as secure by design models are used, as algorithmic bias is being considered as a part of that process. So, and my belief, I don't think we can really duck behind the legitimate issues of, LLM tools and other developments regarding them, regarding the kind of ever evolving AI platforms like ChatGPT, Google Bard, DALL-E. It's really tough, right? I know I stated earlier that security is essential, and I'm continuing going to probably push that. But it's also integrating, and this is having you think kind of outside the box. It's also integrating a human-centric approach that weighs heavily on the psychological outcomes. User trust. I don't think it's just, you should just do it. I think it's it's proactive, it's insightful, and I think it's also ethically important for us to consider those. So just think about it for a moment. What threshold do you trust information custodians right now? Your security practitioners, your leaders in this space. So what threshold do you consider information custodians? Do you trust them with your children, with your finances, your health care, your business? So those are things that we do have to start thinking about as users, as developers, as thought leaders. So we're going to turn the page to wrap this section up with the challenges and solutions. And we're going to cover the biases can be explicit or implicit. We all know that. Intentional or organic. The importance of interdisciplinary collaboration with technologists, psychologists, sociologists, and linguists, and the importance of that collaboration. And notably, the instance of bias, algorithmic bias, and its societal repercussions. So let's start with developers, the bias and implicit about. Developers will inherently encounter algorithmic bias. It's a coined term by pioneer Joseph Weizenbaum. In 1976, his book, I think it was called Computer Power and Human Reason. He suggests that bias could arise in both the data use in a program, but also the way a program is coded. So biases are never going to disappear as long as humans are on this planet. We hope that we're still here. But we have a powerful opportunity on how we allow them to control our outcomes. We have that power to control it. So that's the beauty of being human. Do we ingest knowingly algorithmic biases into our coding? And if so, you're clearly doing it with malicious intent to harm, to impact, to incite something negative. So if you're not doing it with those intent, then why not considering what both Microsoft and Google has already begun doing as they've been developing their LLM tools? And what they're doing is they're integrating interdisciplinary collaborations that include their team of developers, that include their technologists, that include their security teams. But it also is inclusive of sociologists, psychologists, and linguistics to provide a high-level oversight of their development to do the best that they can to minimize algorithmic bias. Those organizations, we all know, have the resources to do that. And most global organizations have the resources to pull that type of level of collaborations. But what I would suggest is for those organizations that may be listening to this presentation who are interested in developing a LLM tool for the purpose of monetizing it or use for some good, my recommendation is that no, you don't have those resources, but what you do have access to your disposal presently are universities that are very interested in organizations that are developing tools for the good. And there goes your collaboration without having to expend or having to have a large budget, $1 billion plus budget. There are organizations that are presently building some great tools, but you need the resources to ensure that you have the appropriate level of expertise in the room, oversight, and collaboration, that you have a tool that is definitely marketable and usable. right? And algorithmic bias is a part of that oversight. So I was concerned about smaller organizations, and then as I've been doing more research and talking to others throughout different countries as well as organizations within the U.S., I've realized that we do have things at our disposal. You know, part of this presentation is to not reinvent the wheel, but to look at things that we have in our existing toolbox. And that is, definitely collaborating with universities or local colleges that are interested in your work. So recommendations for ethical AI development: fostering interdisciplinary collaboration, bias detection mitigation, prioritizing user-centric education, transparency and accountability, and integrating behavioral analysis for user insights. So now we're going to dive into my favorite area, although I do love the security aspect of it. So that's very fascinating. What I would like you to do before I start this section is I would like you to check out the OWASP, OWASP guidelines on LLM development and security guidelines on LLM development. Safeguarding ethical development in ChatGPT and other LLMs, the C of governance and AI governance, navigating the governance maze, crafting a strategy, a comprehensive strategy. So we're going to dive into this here. So managing risk and respecting privacy. Managing risk and respecting privacy. So let's turn back to the security by design concept that I mentioned earlier in my earlier slide. And I mentioned the AI model at DLC. Data scientists say that managing an AI model isn't just a single step. That's not their belief. It's not just one single step. It's about continuously updating the model to help keep it working well, right? As things change, like data use, and if there's big real shifts in technology or in the business and or the world, for example, it's important to keep an eye on how well the model is doing, to regularly make adjustments. That's their mindset, right? That's their thought process around that, or their methodology. It also means looking out for changes in how accurate the model is regarding any odd behaviors or predictions it's making, any changes in the data it could be throwing that could kind of throw off the model a little bit, and also remembering and putting the model to use at just the beginning. So you've got to kind of work actively on how to make sure it stays relevant and effective as everything around it changes. So that's the data scientist methodology and approach around that. To properly identify, measure, and risk in an organization. From managing the risk and respecting the privacy, if organizations are either going to implement, like I mentioned earlier, and or design a tool, you have to really assess your organization. It's no different than any other risk assessment you've conducted. The difference is the usage. The difference is your culture, your culture, your workforce. How are you planning on using this? How do you think how it will be adopted, and what considerations need to be covered around that? But privacy is not just about safeguarding data. It's also about safeguarding our emotional well-being around it. I believe behavioral and cultural analysis can be beneficial to assess the developer's threshold of psychological and sociological and cultural experiences outside of their own. So by using a methodology that developers can improve the design and functionality of that LLM, it helps create a more positive and productive human AI experience. At least, again, that's my opinion. In order to safeguard integrity and security of AI systems, it's vital to spot any irregularities of unexpected activities. That should be kind of a given. Addressing the abnormalities of that, and especially those stemming from human interactions, allowing us to counteract potential threats before they escalate into the major issues. With that said, employing an AI system for such a task is crucial to guarantee its precision, right? Its fairness, and commitment to upholding privacy, especially when addressing an audience unfamiliar with the technicalities, i.e. possibly your workforce, i.e. possibly your clients. So is regulatory guardrails, are they really enough? Well, I think it depends. It depends on, are they privacy specific, security, or development specific? Because safeguards are going to have gaps. And as security professionals, we already know that. There is no perfect solution in security. It never has been. But what we do know is that we can minimize our risk. And that's the idea behind safeguarding, is that we're going to do our best to minimize that risk. Privacy is no different. Security and development is no different from that respect. So imagine for a moment that generative AI is a boat in a sea filled with various types of sharks. Some sharks see the boat as a possible ally for food, while others view the boat as a threat. This analogy really, I believe, captures the dynamics between governance and generative AI. Neither are acquainted with each other, yet there's a sense of recognition. So we as allies or adversaries, meaning us, governance professionals, typically, governance and compliance is perceived as the shark. Governance is made up of a large body of global agencies and organizations. These entities are responsible for ensuring the safeguards and policies, regulations that are established in place for societal well-being. That's pretty much our job. So, however, the realm of AI and governance, though present, it's really right now in its infancy. There are other principles and guidelines that have been produced. OCED is a very popular principle. It stands for Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a globally presently recognized by the privacy industry. And OCED is considered guidelines for classification of AI systems. And that comprises of 5 main dimensions. They also have EU ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI. And there are others, which is the AI Act as well, that was just recently, I think it was voted on by Parliament in June of 2023. So there is the EU AI Act, it's called. And that is an act that kind of supports the GDPR framework of privacy and governance. The emergence of new the emergence of new governance frameworks are in the marketplace, but from more of a global perspective. The US is still working on theirs in terms of identifying acts and regulations and guardrails around that. But until that's done, we really have to, at this point, ensure that any governance that your organization takes on, any AI governance, any audit controls that your organization decides to develop, that it doesn't stifle the innovation, that it protects the innovation, right? So we want to make sure that we have a striking balance between innovation and protection. I believe taking a hybrid approach to the blend of existing standards like SSDLC, Secure by Design, the NIST RFM framework, it's RFM 1.0, OWASP, LLM, and the monitoring and evaluations that are specifically tailored to your AI program or system design. You want to ensure you take a proactive versus a reactive approach in developing your AI program and or systems. You want to ask good questions. You know, how do we develop an AI policy and processes and procedure. What are the guidelines around that? What is our risk appetite for accepting an AI system, a solution in our organization? And where possible, emphasize security measures, psychological considerations, and ethical design if you are designing systems that are large language models. For example, liability in the applicable use of it, regulations and guardrails around that. So make sure that you kind of focus on those areas, because it's really, really important, again, either for the usage, the development, or the design of it. So what's the goal here? Responsible steps towards harmonious AI integration. Yes, that is our goal. Our goal overall is not to stifle. We want to create the balance. We want to have a hybrid approach. We want to balance regulation with innovation. And we want to adopt a hybrid security methodology that focuses, once again, on ensuring that we're all kind of working together collaboratively as technologists, as developers, as security practitioners, as leaders, and as users. So I want to stop there and say thank you, all of you, to listening to my presentation today. And I really hope that some of the things that I share with you provoke some thought and insight and ideas. And here's my information if you'd like to contact me. So again, thank you very much. And then I have one final thought. These are the references and resources that I have listed for you. So the question is, my little car in the center at the end here is a Jaguar, or old versus new. So which one do you want to be? The new Jaguar or the old Jaguar? So thank you very much.
Great job, KJ. Love it. I was taking notes the whole time. I'm thinking the audience probably was too. So really, really solid stuff. Appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind, finish typing out some of that Q&A there in the chat, and we'll get everybody else out to the networking break and then our next round of conference sessions. So thanks again. Wonderful job on the presentation. Obviously a relevant topic, and we need to get our arms around this stuff. So thanks again, Kimberly. If you haven't gotten to your answers, please reach out. We'll throw her email back up there real quick again. Get back to the right one. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the next round of sessions. Thanks again, KJ.
Thank you.